You heard it there. The Liberals are amping up their critique of what a Pierre Poilievre government would do. According to them, Poilievre would take away dental and childcare programs and women's reproductive rights. The Tories say the Liberals are fear-mongering because of how far back the Grits are in public opinion polls. But could the messaging punch through? Our Sunday strategy session is here to talk about that. Kathleen Monk is a former NDP strategist and director of communications to the late Jack Layton. Corey tonight was Ontario Premier Doug Ford's campaign manager and former director of communications for Prime Minister Stephen Harper. And Scott Reid is former communications director to Prime Minister Paul Martin. Hi, everybody.
Hey,
good to see you. This is kind of picking up on, Scott, a point that you made last week where your advice was to kind of pick one thing to go hard at Poilievre on. I think they took the second half of that to heart, in that they went very hard this week. And we picked those clips because they're a real sampling of every single press conference that took place and how it all turned into here's what the Conservatives would do. Do you think the strategy will be effective in either the short or the long term?
I think it's broadly the right way to go, but I have a couple concerns. So first of all, yes, I would hammer, like I said last week, on cuts and chaos. Just try to brand those things around Poilievre, force him into the public arena, force him to deny that he would make certain cuts, force him to try to play defense for a change. But there's two things. One, it's really, really, really important. You pick things that people care about, that are driving their votes, that affect their thinking about politics. So I'm not convinced that child care and dental care are the biggest items that I would bang on. I would go after a woman's right to choose. I would say that he wants to cut access to choice. I would definitely say he wants to cut health care. And I would talk about he wants to cut a bunch of the investments we're making to draw plants, draw jobs, draw manufacturing here. He won't support them. Hammer on those things. Jobs, health care, a woman's right to choose, dental care, childcare. I get that these are important programs. I don't think they're vote changers. I don't think that the things that people have come to cherish just yet. They feel more like liberal promises, part of the liberal agenda. I think they got to get over themselves. Go to what the voters are saying they prioritize and focus on that.
I was watching with interest this week the way in which the Conservatives were or weren't responding, Corey, and I thought that there wasn't a lot of opportunity for media, for example, to ask what the Liberals were putting in the window. But I wonder if going forward you think that the Conservatives are okay to kind of leave it like we're going to give you these details closer to the election, or whether the heightened scrutiny on them because of where they sit in the polls will force them to maybe have to answer those questions earlier.
I don't think they're going to be forced to answer those questions. And I think they should, by and large, ignore the attacks from the Liberals. Like how I would sum up the Liberal attacks. And I agree with Scott. They need to be more aggressive. And I also agree that they need to be more on topics of greater concern to Canadians. But I would say that they're, the old saying, a day late and a dollar short. I'd say they're a year late and they're about $10 million short in terms of actually framing this campaign. The sad reality is we're in such an atomized media market these days that pressure from sort of the mainstream media outlets or the government themselves on these questions is probably insufficient. It needs to be backed up by a sustained attack on topics of concern to Canadians and through paid media. And for whatever reason, they continue to not take that approach.
That circles back to something we've talked about frequently, especially now as they do seem to have a very specific strategy in place for going after Poilievre or trying to define him. Are you also perplexed that there's not more behind it? I mean, there's more social media, I will say. They're very proud, everyone behind the scenes. We got 5 million views on that video on Capital Games, but is that enough?
First of all, I think that, if you're a betting person, it'd be a smart strategy to bet on the fact that maybe the Liberals will change their own advertising take in the coming months. They may even change the laws so they can do more government advertising. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. But I think, just back to your original question around will the strategy work? I think fear has worked in the past, and that's been a typical play that Liberals have used, right? We saw that in 2004. I think Scott was on that campaign. We saw it. We also saw it in 2019. We saw it in Ontario, for instance, in Kathleen Wynne in 2014, where she eked out a victory with what were considered tired Ontario Liberals at the time and won against Tim Hudak. But I don't think so. So basically, Liberals know the fear play, right? They know that playbook. But the problem is, actually, I think they're fighting against the couch couch right now. I think people are so apathetic, they're so angry, that how do they actually motivate people? And I think the problem is that they can't just keep on pounding away at the fear and concerns around Pierre Poilievre. They actually have to put some policy in the window, some more positive throws. They can't just cede the policy ground, if you will, to the Conservatives. And that's what they've been doing. So they need a better message on that, too. It's going to be a multi-pronged strategy. As we've said on the show a few times, they can't just do one thing. They have to do multiple things, and very well all at the same time if they're going to get out of this hole.
Do you think that's true, Scott? And I would say, I think they think that's what they are doing. I think they think that's what the budget was, right? Putting all this new policy, which they constantly tell me behind the scenes again is popular, if not making them popular, the policies themselves are popular. They think that was putting the offering in the window, and then they're going to combine it with the fear.
Well, but they would argue that those are seeds that are going in the ground and that somehow they're going to grow crops. When? Next month, next year, 3 years from now? Some of those timelines are too late to help. So I would start with the fear, man. Kathleen's right. I was there in 2004. I was there in 2014 as well. And I think that they need to do what they failed to do for the past 18 months, and that is really scuff up this wonderful all things to all people image of Pierre Poilievre. But I'll just kind of repeat what Corey said. The problem is, even in 2003 and 2014, which was a very different media marketplace, we used advertising. So having the Prime Minister and others say these things at microphones, after news conferences, on mainstream news is an incredibly inefficient way, even if it's supplemented by social media, which has also turned into a toilet that's less connected to fewer people. It just doesn't reach enough people, and it doesn't affect enough people. So it's got to be backed up by pure money, money, money.
We've made a few historical references. The other one I was thinking of was another Kathleen Wynne election, Corey, which you would know a lot about, where the momentum for change was so great that despite the fact that there was a lot of unknowns and fears in some instances about what Doug Ford would do, he put basically nothing, and I should say maybe you too, nothing in the window, didn't answer any of those questions, a one-page platform, and still because the momentum was so great, was able to win. And I guess by that I mean context matters. What is your sense of the context in this instance?
Well, the context is affordability. I think that they would be well served to open up a front against their own governor of the Bank of Canada and talk about interest rates. This is clearly going to be a change election, and that's going to be an uphill struggle for any incumbent government. But you have to, if you want to have any hope of success, you've got to make the alternative unpalatable, which is the attack side. And you have to show that you have some gas in the tank to make changes in areas where people are concerned about. And to Scott's earlier point, I'm sure, Kathleen, you're not going to like this, but like pharmacare and dental care and, some of these other things, well, they may be of concern to some important voters. They're registering a 1 or a 2 out of on a scale of 1 to 10, whereas the fear of renegotiating your mortgage or finding rental housing that's appropriate or paying for your grocery bill, those are like 9s and 10s, if not 11s and 12s on that rating scale in terms of their intensity and their importance to voters. So you can't be majoring in the minors, I guess is what I would say in terms of the topics that you choose to discuss. And the agenda, insofar as you have a new agenda as the government, has to be laser-like focused on those issues that are actually driving public sentiment and driving that push for change.
The only caveat I would add to that is, what if rates start to get cut on June 5th? I mean, I don't want to ever present it as like, oh, people are really rolling in it now. Like, gross prices are up 20%. Yes, inflation is in the target range, but it feels terrible, Kathleen. But that doesn't mean that the public sentiment can't change over time. Yeah,
and if people's desire for change is so great and their anger, frankly, at this government or exhaustion with this government just doesn't change no matter how many quarter points the bank governor might slice off in this year or in the next year. I don't think it's going to make that kind of impact. I mean, you're seeing this play out in the U.S. where the U.S. has a roaring economy, but no one is giving President Biden the credit for that whatsoever. And that's because public sentiment right now is not willing to give any political leader leader any credit. There's no room for victory laps right now. And that's the problem. And so no one's giving credit to politicians, even if they are doing the hard work or putting the policies forward. They're just kind of almost apathetic, as I said. And that's going to be the challenge in this next election, is luring people off the couch, getting them to vote, motivating them, get that enthusiasm back. There is the enthusiasm there, certainly with the Conservative base. They will get out. But how do the progressive side, the progressive parties, get their base out and get them motivated to even participate in this election?
Save that part of the discussion for next time. I got to leave it there. Thanks, everyone. Our Sunday strategy session, Scott Reed, Corey tonight, and Kathleen Monk.